The bow and arrow might be the second most iconic fantasy weapon there is, behind the good old reliable sword. It's hard to imagine a fantasy setting where someone isn't plinking someone to death from 50 yards away. A lot of fantasy delegates the bow and arrow to the realm of the elves, and if I'm to believe the dwarves, this is because their silly little girly fingers can only handle a bow and not a real weapon. But Fire Emblem, despite being a 30-year-old fantasy series, doesn't have any elves, so they're just given to silly little guys instead. Archers have been around since the series' inception, and on paper, they should be a pretty good unit type, as they offer reliable and accurate chip damage from a safe distance. Unfortunately, in practice, archers often struggle, because how reliable that chip damage really is, and how necessary that chip damage really is, varies wildly on a game-to-game basis. So today, we're going to look at the archers and snipers from the series' history, and just see how good they've really been. And don't forget to leave a like and a comment on the video and subscribe to the channel, or else you'll find an arrow in your throat very soon.
There is no meme. This is just a threat.
Alright, let's lay down some ground rules. For starters, I am only going to be talking about the classes that start as an archer. Specifically, archer. I feel as though hunters and horsemen and nomads have enough distinction that I'm not going to cover all of them here. However, I will be talking about bow knights when they promote from archers, like in Gaiden. While this does seem like a pointless distinction, if I covered horsemen and nomads as well, this video would be 2.5 hours long, and I feel like enough of the games make a distinction between them that they can warrant their own video. So we will not be talking about the likes of Castor or Medale here, but I will be talking about the likes of Python and Varian, because they can be bow knights from archers. Secondly, once we get to the point where reclassing becomes available, I'm going to start by talking about the class in general in the game, and how useful it is to have around, or how useful it would be to make someone an archer. And when I get to talking about the specific units, I'm going to be talking about them as if you leave them in the archer class. Because if someone clicks on a video about archers in Fire Emblem, I feel like they don't want to see me talking about Sage Varian. And lastly, on the account that these videos cover the entire franchise, it is very likely that I say something really stupid. So please, accept this little bit as my entire get out of accountability free card so that I can say any dumb thing I want, and then when you in the comments correct me for being dumb, I can just point to this little bit and it gives me complete diplomatic immunity. Thank you. Starting with Fire Emblem 1, archers are a pretty decent class to use, as long as you're not afraid of going a little slowly. Archers do not have very good movement at base. In fact, they have the exact same movement as armor knights, so they're not getting anywhere quickly, but Fire Emblem 1 actually has a lot of one-tile-wide choke points, be they in bridges or just hallways. Because of this, you can just plop an armor knight or some other tanky unit on the bridge, and then have an archer behind them, and that can work as a decent way to clear a lot more maps than you would think. Of course, this is a very slow method of doing it, but hey, it doesn't matter if it gets the job done quickly, it just needs to get the job done. Archers also are blessed with an incredible promotion. The way the promotion works in Fire Emblem 1 is that the unit is brought up to the base stats of whatever the promoted class is, and if they're already past that stat point, they don't get anything on promotion. And this is relevant because Sniper has an incredible stat line, with really good skill and speed, solid defense for what they want, and good enough strength. So because of this, no matter how weak your archers may be, when you promote them, they'll get pumped up to a level where they're probably going to be able to contribute for the rest of the game. So yeah, archers are pretty good, as long as you're willing to wait for them, which is kind of a problem when the horseman class exists, which are archers on horses, so you don't have to worry about them, they can get to the fight much easier than an archer can, but they have worse promotion gains, So it's kind of intended to be that the only advantage horsemen have over archers is movement, while archers will have better raw stats. Unfortunately, in practice, that means nothing when move is considered the most important stat, but still, I see where they're coming from, and since most people don't care about playing efficiently, archers as a class can work. Unfortunately, there are quite a few more problems for archers than just movement. For example, archers can't counterattack from close range, because bows can't attack from one tile away. This is pretty consistently a problem in the series, because Fire Emblem tends to be very enemy phase dominant. And what I mean by that is that the best strategy is to kill your enemies in mass on the enemy phase, by having powerful frontliners who can soak up a lot of hits and counterattack with powerful weaponry. So typically, you'd want a frontline fighter who can attack from close range or long range, with something like a hand axe or a javelin. Now, there are a few games where that's not very viable because enemies are very powerful. Unfortunately, Fire Emblem 1, and a lot of other games, are not that game. So, it's not the greatest to not be able to counterattack. This also affects how quickly archers can gain experience, because since they can't attack on enemy phase, they're not really killing anything on enemy phase. So that's a bunch of experience they can't get that something else can. So it makes it a little difficult to train up an archer. So they have a lot of problems that's native to the bow that they can't really get away from. Now, while those are big problems, that doesn't mean archers don't have all the positives that I was talking about earlier. So there is still some hope for archers. Unfortunately, archers don't get a very good rep to start the franchise. Gordon's base stats are atrocious, so his chip damage isn't particularly strong and isn't particularly reliable. And the thing that archers are effective against, flying units, don't really show up early either, so Gordon doesn't really have anything to do. Much less so when units like Agma, Barst, and Navarre show up, who don't really need chip damage to kill anything. Still though, Gordon benefits from the promotion gains that I was talking about earlier, and his growth rates are actually pretty decent. So once you promote him and his stats get bumped up to Sniper, he's likely to be able to grow even stronger. So he's not god-awful. You can use him if you want, just know that there are better options out there. For example, George. George's main strength is that he comes pre-promoted, so he requires no investment to get to those sweet, sexy sniper stats. And while he isn't likely to grow any stronger from his base stats, because his growth rates outside of weapon level are not that good, he doesn't really need to. Sniper's base stats really are phenomenal, and due to the overall lower enemy quality in Fire Emblem 1, they'll actually carry you a lot farther than you would think. George can do really reliable chip damage, really reliable killing on some of the frailer enemies or flying units, and he requires no investment to get going. He's just really good right out the gate, pretty early in the game for a pre-promote like him. He shows up so early, in fact, that he predates your first access to the Orion's Bolt, the item to promote archers. Because of this, even if you were training Gordon up to this point, George is just always going to be better than him, and will be for several chapters, just adding on to his early power. And since George's only noticeable growth rate is in weapon level, he's likely going to be the only archer who can naturally wield the Parthia, unless you want to give the other archers the manual. He just has a lot going for him for how early he shows up. And you can just slap him on every map after you get him, and there'll be something for him to do. He really goes to show that you don't need to be flashy, his stats certainly don't look impressive, but that doesn't mean he won't do a damn solid job. And lastly, Thomas is your George if George fucking dies. He's not going to be as good as George if you just want to use him out the box, and he's not going to be as good as Gordon if you actually wanted to train him up from level 1. Thomas's main advantage, though, is that he only is 2 levels away from promotion when you get him. And the Orion's Bolt is literally in a chest on his join map, so you can very quickly just give him 2 levels, promote him, and have him ready to go. Though again, this is pointless if George is alive, because you could just use him instead. Still though, it's worth remembering that Fire Emblem was designed around permadeath, so while Thomas isn't really useful to a casual player who resets when someone dies, if you play the games as our good lord intended, he'll do his job just fine. He's not amazing, he's not terrible, he is solid enough. Okay, so in Fire Emblem 1, archers might not have been the greatest. They had a lot of problems, and even the best among them weren't really the best units in the game, so what does Fire Emblem Gaiden do? Well, it decides to give every archer the absolute biggest lump of crack it could find and makes them busted. Archers now can also promote into bow knights in this game, first of all, allowing them to have incredible mobility. But they didn't even need the mobility, because bows in this game can attack up to 5 tiles away, making it so that no matter where on the map you put them, odds are they can hit something. And on top of that, bows can hit at close range now, so they can defend themselves on enemy phase, and archers can just continue to do really good damage at every point in the game. The only reason that Bow Knight isn't the best class in the game is because their actual base stats, which are incredibly important in Gaiden because everyone's growth rates are shit, so they're basically tied to a class's stats, aren't the greatest. But this can be solved due to some weird-ass mechanic called the Dreadfighter loop. For some reason, probably a bug, maybe a feature, a Dreadfighter can promote into a villager, and then re-promote into any other class line, but with Dreadfighter base stats. So if you do that with any of your Dreadfighters, you can just put them back into Archer, and they will kill everything in the game entirely by themselves, because you have a fucking Dreadfighter as a Bow Knight. Now, this is pretty slow and time-consuming to do, though I know there are some strategies that let Cliff do this really well, but it's still something that can be done, and is a point in favor of the Archer. In fact, speaking of Cliff, if you don't want to go through all that, it's not a terrible idea to make him into a Bow Knight. Yeah, you willingly want to make your villager an Archer. That's pretty good. It's not the greatest because Dreadfighter exists, but it is not a bad option. But villagers are their whole different beast, and for a whole different video. Ignore how I used Ewan for an example of a Dark Mage in the first episode. That was just the pilot episode. We're doing things differently now. What about the archers that you naturally get? Well, they're pretty good. Python does come in a little late in Act 1, and might be a little bit behind the rest of your army in terms of stats, but since he can attack from anywhere, and by the time you get him you already have the steel bow, giving him the aforementioned 5 attack range I was talking about, it's not too difficult to get Python up to speed, though players might want to grind a little bit for that. And once he's up to speed, his decent strength growth is really all he's going to need to do strong, reliable damage from Timbuktu. He does have some speed problems that might make doubling a little difficult as the game goes on, but that doesn't stop him from being a good contributor of your army. He's also the only archer you get naturally, unless you made one of the villagers one, so you're kind of stuck with him either way. Still though, a pretty decent unit to be stuck with. Leon is Celica's only archer, and he's also pretty damn good. His base stats are a bit better than Python's, though his growth rates are a bit worse. But it's Gaiden, so all of their growth rates are terrible. And I also feel like Celica's maps want an archer a bit more than Alm's do, so Leon has more to do on pretty much every map. His only problem is that the steel bow shows up a little bit later on Celica's side, so he doesn't get the coveted 5 range as quickly, but that's a minor setback. Leon is capable of contributing from start to finish, and he will be one of the better units in Celica's army. It just goes to show that archers can be really good if you give them 5 range. Now, some people think that's kind of overdoing it, but I mean, hey, whatever works, man. If you need to give them 5 range for them to be good, give them 5 range. Fuck it. We ball. Fire Emblem 3 decides to balance snipers by not technically touching them at all, but more so changing the world around them. Fire Emblem 3 places an emphasis on the dismount mechanic. Whenever you fight indoors, you have to dismount if you're a mounted unit. So snipers, since they didn't have a horse to begin with, don't lose any stats or movement, while a lot of your other classes will. Because of this, they actually now have the highest possible movement when indoors, giving you a valid reason to want to deploy them on some maps over horsemen. Because of this, snipers are pretty damn good in Fire Emblem 3. All of the Book 1 characters are now just a little bit better because of this mechanic, and while this doesn't save them from all of the other problems that they have, it does give them that little boost to make them more viable, which is really impressive because snipers themselves aren't really touched, just the world around them, and it's crazy how effective that can be at balancing classes. So for Book 1, Gordon, George, and Thomas are the exact same as I said before, but now a little bit better. And while promotion gains no longer work like they do in FE1, snipers don't have to worry about this because for some reason their promotion gains are still incredible, gaining a massive 5 skill and speed on promotion in a game where all stats cap at 20, so you can imagine just how good of a boost that is. Moving on to the archers individually in Fire Emblem 3, Thomas was apparently shot dead in Miami by a rival drug cartel, because he is not a playable character in Fire Emblem 3 Book 2. Instead, he's been replaced by Ryan, the younger brother of Gordon. Now, Ryan actually has really good growth rates across the board, being better than Gordon in everything but a small difference in luck. In exchange, he is a level 1 archer on Chapter 1. This means he is very difficult to raise up without taking significant time to slow down and grind for him. However, if you do want to grind for him, Ryan will reward you. His stats, especially once he promotes, are through the roof, and he will contribute on every map for the rest of the game if you choose to get him there. And even if you don't, it's almost as if the game is designed around you using your archers early, as Fire Emblem 3, because it's a sadistic little bitch, loves to throw wyvern riders at you immediately. And this isn't just like a normal class, this is a promoted class in Arcanea, and you get faced with them constantly early on, and as soon as Chapter 2. Because of this, Ryan, Gordon, and the hunter Warren are kind of really important, if only for a little while, because nothing else you really have can stand up to them. So hey, use them when you gotta, and if you get some good level ups on the Dragon Riders, stick with them. Also, quick aside, how old is Ryan? Cause I know that Jean is technically the youngest character in the series at 10 years old, but I think Ryan might be younger. Look at that little baby face. We are making him fight and kill for his country when he should be staring at an iPad and watching Roblox videos. What's the country come to? Moving on to Ryan's big brother Gordon, he's marginally better now than he was before. He shows up at Chapter 1, again, but now he's level 5, which means that canonically, he only gained 4 level ups in the entire war in the first game. Gordon has better bases than Ryan, but worse growth rates, but thanks to sniper promotion gains, it largely doesn't matter. If you want to grind up Gordon and use him, he will be a very competent offensive threat. It does take a little bit of time to use him though, so... Now, this might sound crazy, but remember how in FE1 I said that George was the best one in the game because he didn't require any investment? Alright, now let me hit you with some absolutely nutty knowledge. George is the best sniper in Fire Emblem 3 because he doesn't require any investment. Coming in with his really good base stats once again, George in Book 2 is an automatic deployment for pretty much any indoors map in the game, and even some outdoors ones, because he's just gonna do his job really well. There isn't too much to say about George in Book 2, since literally he feels exactly the same like he does in Book 1, though I will admit his recruitment is funny, because you have to talk to him with Gordon. Now, Gordon and George have never had a conversation together. They were not from the same country, they have nothing to do with each other than a village that tells you, hey, archers should get along. And apparently that's all George needs. I love Fire Emblem 3, man. Moving on to Genealogy of the Holy War, archers in that game have a huge problem. They don't have a horse. If you're not aware, Fire Emblem 4 is incredibly mount dominant, with huge maps that have infantry units often struggling to catch up. Now to make up for this, archers across the board for the player are cracked at combat. They have some of the strongest offense in the game, and thanks to how the arena works in Fire Emblem 4, they're more than capable of getting the experience they need to keep up with the rest of your army in terms of levels. So if you're willing to play inefficiently, archers will definitely be very helpful to have around. Unfortunately, you have to say if you want to play inefficiently for any infantry class in FE4. But that's the breaks. The first archer you recruit is Jomke at the tail end of Chapter 1, and he is a beast, having really good base stats, a really good weapon to start with, and a solid collection of offensive skills. Getting Pursuit, which is highly coveted as doubling is not something every unit can do in FE4. He also gets Charge, which will allow him to re-trigger combat pretty consistently, and Adept, which means he can just fire twice sometimes. And with all of those combined, Jomke will shoot at something until it dies. It is very fun to watch Prince Jam walk up to any enemy and trigger 12 attacks in a row before they can even do anything. He is actually one of the best boss killers in the first generation, as he has surprisingly good bulk for an archer, and he's capable of punishing them with his plethora of skills. You do have to wait for him to catch up to your army, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record with that, but it really is a consistent problem for the archer class, especially in Fire Emblem 4. Still though, he is going to be really good if your playstyle allows for him to be deployed. Genuinely, one of the most fun units in the series for me personally. Watching him fire his bow 37 times never gets old, no matter how many times I play Fire Emblem 4. His only real weakness has nothing to do with his capabilities on the battlefield, and more to do with his capabilities as a father. Outside of IDing, there isn't really a great pairing for him, but that's a small drop in the bucket compared to what he can do. You can easily just not pair him off with anyone. He'll die single, but he will die with many kills on his hands. You see, Jomke was a good unit because he had a plethora of combat skills to help him destroy things. Brigid is really good because she has one weapon that only she can wield, and it does all the heavy lifting for her. Brigid comes in towards the end of Chapter 3, so she really only has 2.5 chapters to do anything, but she very quickly gets to Ufel, a weapon that gives her 60 base strength, and it can only get better from there. She will annihilate anything you point her at. But she does have some accuracy problems, not enough to really be a big issue, but her lack of consistency compared to Jomke might be something the player wants to keep in mind. Still though, regardless of if you get it done with skills or with a good weapon, an archer in Generation 1 is going to take care of everything for you. Jomke, Brigid, whatever you pick, your enemy will die, and there will not be much of their corpse left after they're done. In the second generation, you only get one archer, Fabale, Brigid's son, and he is every bit as powerful as she is, mainly because he also gets Ufel. Fabale is an important character in Generation 2 because he's another one of those RNG-proof units. No matter who you have Brigid marry, Fabale is always going to be capable of helping you. Fire Emblem 4 has a ton of units like this. A lot of people seem to be afraid of fucking up their pairings in FE4, but that really can't happen because there are so many failsafes to give you good units anyway. Fabale will look at something, pull back his bow, and it will already be disintegrated to ash before the arrow even gets there. he is going to be very powerful for you no matter what. If you somehow manage to get Brigid killed in Gen 1, Fabale's replacement is Asalo, who is okay as far as substitutes go. He has Pursuit, which is really useful, and he can do pretty good damage at base. His strength in particular is likely to be very good, with a combination of in-game events and his pretty good growth rate in it. His speed might not increase that much as the game goes on, because his growth in it's kind of garbage, but it's high enough at base that he should be able to get the job done. Obviously, the ideal thing to have happen is not getting Brigid killed, but if you somehow get her killed, Asalo will do okay. Nothing amazing, just okay. Which, for a substitute, is pretty goddamn good. Fire Emblem 5 feels like it should be the moment for archers to come back strong. After all, it features the return of forced dismounting, which gave them a big advantage in FE3. Unfortunately, archers face a bit of an uphill battle. Thracia is a pretty enemy phase dominant game, with a lot of the generic enemies for most of the game being pretty weak and something you don't need chip damage to solve. Archers also are completely incapable of ever capturing enemies, which is a pretty big mechanic in FE5. Even with those problems though, archers and snipers should still theoretically have a place in your army, for being good damage indoors, even if they're not that useful elsewhere. Unfortunately, the problem for the class in FE5 isn't really the concept of the class or the weakness of bows as a weapon, it's who you get in the archer class. Tanya shows up as your resident Chapter 1 archer, and she really struggles. Her stat line really wants her to be a low strength, high skill and speed archer who doesn't deal a lot of damage but doubles everything and hits reliably. Unfortunately, her horrid base constitution shows that her arms are made out of noodles, so she's weighed down by every single bow in the game. Because of this, she isn't really even that fast of a unit and will struggle to deal meaningful damage. Combine that with all the other problems archers have that I described earlier, Tanya just struggles to keep up. And even if you do use scroll abuse to rig her growth rates into being really good, Thracia is the kind of game where that alone isn't enough. Anyone can use the scrolls to max out their stats. You need useful skills or useful classes in order to really stand out, and Tanya just has neither. But because she's in Thracia, you can rig her level ups and make her really good. It's just the payoff for it isn't that great. Her only saving grace is that she has support bonuses with Dagdar and Osian, two of the best units in the game. So that's something, but it's not nearly enough of anything. Ronin comes in right after Tanya in Chapter 2, and his stats are weird. See, Ronin, for whatever reason, has one more point of move than Tanya, in exchange for not getting any move when he promotes, so that helps him on outdoor maps early on. But what's also weird are his growth rates. His magic growth rate is a whopping 55%, while his strength growth isn't even as high as 20%. Now you might be thinking, oh, he's just designed for magical weapons. Yeah, all the magical bows in Fire Emblem 5. Which is to say that there's nothing. Now, it's not actually a useless stat, as magic in Fire Emblem 5 doubles as the resistance stat, so I guess you could say he's a anti-mage archer? Which is a niche no one needs or wants? Yeah, I don't understand why he's built the way that he is. He's kind of a meme unit among Fire Emblem 5 fans, specifically for that weird-ass magic growth. But yeah, he's a bit better than Tanya in the long run because of his better constitution and therefore better attack speed, but it's really not the best. Now this is the part where you might expect me to start talking about the George of this game, the pre-promoted sniper that bypasses the weak archer beginning and is just a solid unit for the entire game. Unfortunately, there is no George. Fire Emblem 5 does not have any pre-promoted snipers. You got Tanya, and you got Ronin. So it's actually a very weak showing by the class in this game. Fire Emblem 5 was not exactly going to be a game where archers can shine, but they definitely had a decent chance to at least be pretty good, if Ronin or Tanya had any real skills or stats worth mentioning. Unfortunately, they don't. So they're banished to the realm of, they can work if you want them to, but it's gonna be an uphill battle. Not the last time I'm gonna be saying that. Moving on to Fire Emblem 6, snipers are actually pretty good now. Enemies in Fire Emblem 6, especially on hard mode, are a bit more threatening than they've been in the past. Because of this, snipers' reliable chip damage is much more important. And the scariest enemy in the game is the Wyvern Rider, an enemy with an innate bow weakness. So snipers can really take advantage of that and end up being very solid units even if they still have all the problems of poor move and no ability to counter at close range. And, though there aren't that many maps that have them, Ballista are no longer their own unique class like in Udral, and are now something anyone of the sniper class line can get in and attack from great range. So snipers do have that usability on some maps. This is a really good game for snipers. You're noticing I'm saying snipers and not archers. Well, you see, Walt is actual shit from an ass. He does not have good base stats at all, and they are so bad that his actually pretty good growth rates are not enough to salvage him. His chip damage is laughable, and he will not be able to get any of the kills he needs to grow unless you really work for it, and it's just not fun. He's not good to use casually, he's not good to use seriously. Walt is just abysmal. It's a damn shame because, like I said, this would be a pretty good game for archers. Unfortunately, Walt's base stats are just too big of a hurdle for him to overcome. I don't know why they designed him this way. Even Gordon was better than him at base. To compare him to Ryan, who was also a Chapter 1 archer with really bad base stats but good growths, Ryan existed in a game where enemies were on average a lot weaker, so his base stats weren't as big of a problem, and he existed in a game with dismounting, so there was some reason to deploy an archer indoors. Walt has neither of these things going for him. The only thing Walt has going for him is that he's a forced deployment in the first 4 maps of the game. Which, yeah, sure, we'll call that a plus. And don't think Dorothy's much better. She has all of the same problems as Walt, doesn't have any of the early game availability, which was his only technical good thing, and her growth rates, while not abysmal, aren't enough to overcome her terrible base stats. The only, and I mean the only thing Walt and Dorothy have going for them is that Chapter 7 on hard mode has 3 Wyvern Riders in it, and they are very difficult to deal with without deploying at least one of them. And just to show you how powerful Wyvern Riders are in this game, yes, being able to deal with 3 of them on 1 chapter is a genuine point of viability in Walt and Dorothy's favor. Unfortunately, that's it. That's all they're good for.
I'm built different. I'm built incorrectly. I'm just raw in every way.
I should not exist.
I should not exist.
Thankfully, like a beautiful blonde beacon of light, Klein has descended from the heavens and is actually very good. Coming in with a base A rank in bows and a silver bow on only Chapter 10 is phenomenal. His base stats are very respectable, especially thanks to the hard mode bonus glitch, which increases his base stats even better. And on top of that, he actually has very respectable growth rates for a pre-promote. So honestly, he starts really strong, and though he won't gain as many level ups as other units, the level ups he gets are gonna be pretty good. He's a solid unit from the moment you get him to the end of the game. Much like his blonde sniper brethren George, Klein is a very solid unit, and is definitely worth consideration for every map in the game where you can afford to field him. It really goes to show how bad Walt and Dorothy's base stats are, because snipers in this game really aren't terrible. As if to apologize for the fact that they gave you 2 abysmal archers at the start of the game, Fire Emblem 6 actually gives you a second beautiful blonde pre-promoted sniper. Egren comes in a while after Klein, and her base stats are normally much better than his. However, there is a caveat. She only is better than him on normal mode, where Klein doesn't get his ridiculous base stat boost because of the hard mode bonus glitch, but on hard mode, Klein's base stats are actually quite close to Egren's. And, because his growth rates are much better than hers, he's likely to be better than her, and there really isn't a map where you would necessarily need 2 snipers. And if you did need 2 snipers, you're probably deploying Shin alongside Klein. That being said, just because Klein's better than her doesn't mean Egren is bad. Far from it. On normal and hard mode, she can contribute very well. And, worst comes to worst, she's a solid Iron Man replacement if Klein died somewhere along the way. Her only actual flaw is for whatever reason her base bow rank is B instead of A, despite the fact that lore-wise and unit-wise it probably really should be A, and not being able to wield silver bows is a pretty significant damage drop against wyverns, which is what you want her to be fighting. Still, that's not enough to not make her a really solid unit. FE6's snipers almost make up for their terrible archers. They're both genuinely really good units that you should consider when thinking about what you want your army to be in FE6. While nothing is mechanically changed about how archers work between Fire Emblem 6 and 7, the game around them does change in some ways that both are pretty good for them and really bad for them. Fire Emblem 7's map design has a bit more defend maps and route maps where high mobility isn't an end-all be-all, so snipers' movement isn't exactly as bad as it could be otherwise, and that is a small plus for snipers. Unfortunately, a pretty big problem is that in Fire Emblem 7's localization, effective damage is reduced from 3 times to 2 times. Now, on the one hand, sure, this means Oswin might survive a hammer sometimes, but it does mean that your archers deal much less damage to flyers. And while Wyvern Riders aren't quite as prevalent or threatening as they were in FE6, they're still around and can still deal some damage. And Pegasus Knights are a lot more common to face, so losing that effective damage bonus does genuinely hurt the archer class. But that's not necessarily a death knell. The class can still function if they learn to give the archers good stats. And did they learn their lesson from Fire Emblem 6? If they did learn their lesson, they certainly didn't show it with fucking Will. Will has just terrible base stats, yet again not really being able to double or kill or threaten anything from when you get him. And as he grows, he'll be okay, maybe, not even. His growth rates aren't good enough to get away from his bad base stats. Again, GBA FE does not like giving archers stats that can work out of the gate. They want to give them growth rates that make you work for good stats, but considering that archers don't gain experience as quickly as other classes, this just means that archers in Game Boy Advance games fucking suck. Will cannot escape the chains of his birth. Will's lone saving grace is that he is a Lin mode unit, meaning that he has those 7 or so chapters to get a lot of experience and come in over-leveled in Ellawood mode. The problem is, if you want to play efficiently, it's much smarter to give those level ups to Kent, Sane, and Florina. But if you're playing casually, you can give Will a good head start and let him just brute force everything with a level advantage. It's not the greatest strategy, but it is a strategy. And Rebecca fares a little, and I mean a little, bit better, I guess. Her speed is much better than his, meaning she can quickly get to a point where she can double enemies and do more consistent chip damage. Unfortunately, her base strength is a pathetic 4, and though her growth rate in it's pretty good, it's not enough to get away from the fact that her base strength is fucking 4. If you want to use Rebecca, you can give her the energy ring that Dorcas comes with, and with her really good growth rates, she might be able to become something worth using if you train her, but she is not efficient at all. Though I do have to say, unlike Walt, Dorothy, and Will, if you train Rebecca, you are going to get something worth using. It's just a really big ask to train Rebecca. In fact, Rebecca is so bad that it was a joke in the fandom for a while that her genetics are why Walt and Roy are terrible, because she's Walt's mother and she breastfed Roy when he was a baby. So the bit was that her DNA was why their stats are so abysmal. And, you don't get a joke like that in the fandom if you're good, I'll say that much. You know, this is probably just me being oblivious, but now that we're on Luis, I just realized literally every pre-promoted sniper in the franchise up to this point was a beautiful blonde person. What the hell was up with that? What about blonde hair meant you could do archery? Oh, yeah, fair enough. Anyways, Luis is a solid unit. Not quite as good as Klein and Agren in FE6, but she can still do a pretty decent job as a filler unit in Fire Emblem 7. Good base stats, has an automatic A support with Pent, which can help both of them on the battlefield pretty nicely. She's not gonna break the game or anything, and nor is she a unit that's that important to deploy, but she just has solid combat, solid stats, and doesn't need any investment. She's not quite to the peak of other pre-promoted snipers, but she's good. Solid good out of 10, which, given Will and Rebecca, means she's the best sniper in the game. Moving on to Sacred Stones, I want you to take a fucking guess as to whether or not they finally made an archer with usable base stats. Wait, hold your breath, no they didn't. Nemi has really good growth rates, but really bad base stats, just like every fucking archer before her in the Game Boy Advance games. However, to Nemi's benefit, she's more like Rebecca than she is Walt or Will. If you want to train her up, she will actually contribute much better. And she has the option to promote into a ranger, which is a first for archers in the series, granting her a horse and a sword to fight at close range. She takes a while to get going, but if you want to stop and feed her kills, be it from bandits on her join map or the arena in Chapter 5, she will genuinely contribute to your army and genuinely be a very powerful unit. It's just Fire Emblem Sacred Stones does not have powerful enemies where you need her chip damage or safe damage, so it's really not necessary, but still, if you're playing casually, it can be fun to watch a little girl become a Cyclops killing machine. So, honestly, go for it. While Inez bucks the trend of being a blonde sniper, he does continue the trend of being pretty good. Sacred Stones has little need for a powerful player phase sniper, as the enemies really aren't that threatening to you, so it's a very enemy phase reliant game, but that doesn't take away Inez's fantastic base stats and ability to kill enemies from his recruitment to the end of the game. He is noticeably worse in Ephraim's route, where he comes in much later, but even on that route, he's still capable from start to end. He's not exactly a you need to deploy him kind of unit. He's a I have enough slots to deploy people this map, I might as well deploy him kind of unit. Still solid, not quite to the heights of units like Klein, but not to the lows of the class either. Just a solid, pretty good. Before we move on, I forgot to mention snipers in this game have a unique class skill called Sure Strike, which, using the sniper's level as a percentage, will have them completely ignore the hit rate of their attack and just guaranteed hit the enemy. This is wildly useless, because snipers are already incredibly accurate anyway, so more often than not, it doesn't matter. The only reason I'm mentioning this was because in the footage for Inez I recorded, he happened to activate it. If it wasn't for that, I would have completely forgotten this was even a thing that could happen. And Sacred Stones is my favorite Fire Emblem, so if I don't remember a mechanic, odds are that tells you how fucking useless it is. Because I have never once forgotten anything in my life.
I mean, that guy should be hunted down and shot. Yeah. Right?
If you've been keeping up with this series, you've heard me say a lot that enemies in Path of Radiance are very bulky. So, archers and snipers should be really good, since even good units in Path of Radiance might not always be able to KO enemies in one round. A sniper's chip damage sounds like it's really useful. And in theory, that would be completely true. This is the kind of game where dealing reliable chip damage is genuinely a good thing to do. But there's one problem. It's not even unique to the sniper class itself, as it's relatively untouched from previous entries. The only thing it has going for it is the fact that its ultimate weapon can attack at one range, and it's only equipable by snipers, not by all bow units. But the double bow comes in really late, so it doesn't really fix the one range problem. It's just kind of neat, I guess. Now, the problem is with the quality of archers and snipers that you get. The first one you get is the pre-promoted sniper Shannon, and he has some interesting quirks in his unit quality. When you get him, his base stats are well beyond anything around him. He can very easily wipe out almost every enemy that faces him on his own, and the ones that he can't one round, he can definitely get close to death's door. He is a very powerful pre-promote. But Shannon leaves at the start of Chapter 8, and you don't get him back until Chapter 19. Over 10 chapters later, and when you get him back, his stats are no longer impressive, and are a bit lower than everything around him. But to make up for this, Shannon has arguably the best growth rates in the entire game. He grows very strong, but since he shows up as a pre-promote, it's really hard to get him any experience to reach the highs his growths can give him. If you want to use Shannon in the long term, it's highly recommended that you feed him every boss kill you can get in his opening maps, so that when he comes back, he's not going to be as far left behind. It's still more effort than it's worth, but you do get a really good product for not too much investment. It's kind of weird how he managed to essentially have an archer training arc despite never being as weak as an archer. It's weird, but kinda neat. His lack of presence does mean that he's not the greatest unit. I mean, he's probably worse than Inez if we want to be honest with ourselves. But at the very least, I think how unique of a unit he is makes him interesting enough that I try to use him every now and again when I play Path of Radiance. He's not the best, but I think he's cool. Rolf, meanwhile, fulfills all the typical qualities of an early game archer. He's green, his base stats are garbage, his growth rates are really good, but not good enough to salvage his terrible bases to play efficiently. But, you know, since you get him on Chapter 1, you can train him up and... Hold on. Okay, I'm getting word from the higher-ups. Turns out Rolf is a level 1 archer with shitty base stats that you don't get on Chapter 1, you get on Chapter 9. He is so ridiculously underpowered that it is a joke to try and actually use Rolf seriously. And to make matters worse, if you did want to pump in the resources to make Rolf good, like bonus experience, he comes in at the same time as Mist, who is also level 1 and a big investment, but someone that actually has some payoff for investing in her. So you're gonna use all of your resources on her, and not Rolf. That being said, he is closer to Rebecca and Ryan, and that if you train him up, he will be pretty good. It's just, it requires so much investment for pretty good, when you could be putting that investment in units like Marcia or Jill, who become really good. I really wish that the archers and snipers in Path of Radiance weren't so bad to train, because their class really could have shined in this game. Instead, if you want to use a bow for chip damage, you just use Astrid. Thankfully, archers and snipers get a bit better in the sequel Radiant Dawn, for a few reasons. First of all, the game has a ledge mechanic, where if you put a unit on the top of a ledge, they gain a huge accuracy buff when attacking below the ledge, and enemies get a huge accuracy debuff. So just slapping an archer on a ledge will allow them to be basically invincible and just defend any point that you want, which happens enough that it's worth considering in regards to archers. On top of that, a new weapon type was introduced called crossbows, and the way that they work is all of the crossbows have huge base might, but they all ignore the strength of the person firing, which is particularly funky when dealing with effective damage, which triples weapon might. If you're firing with, say, an iron bow, tripling that will give you a weapon with base 18 power. Definitely really scary, but there are plenty of flyers that can probably survive that attack. If you're using the weakest crossbow, which has 24 base strength, that gets tripled into 72 damage, which, you might find surprising, is a lot harder for anything to survive. Crossbows can also fire at one range, making them a genuinely nice tool for the kit of snipers, though it's not quite as good as it sounds, because when you remove effective damage, crossbows are normally weaker than just using bows. In execution, they're more so an enemy tool to stop Tabarn from soloing every map that he's on. And even then, he still almost does that. Though, don't get it twisted, crossbows will fire that bird from the sky without a second thought. In what might be the most controversial statement in this video, I don't think Leonardo's that bad. In fact, I think Leonardo is a decent unit. His chip damage is quite useful in Radiant Dawn because of how powerful enemies are, and if you promote him early enough with a Master Crown, you can have him as a sniper with a crossbow in Part 3, and with the Beast Foe skill, he can actually contribute really well on the tricky Dawn Brigade maps of Part 3. And if you're playing any version of Radiant Dawn other than the original Japanese version, Leonardo is given a personal weapon that is stronger than a silver bow and gives him +5 speed. This makes Leonardo's contributions actually pretty meaningful. He's by no means an A-tier unit or anything. Hell, I don't even think I'd call him a B-tier unit, something like a C+, maybe just a flat C. But he actually can contribute surprisingly well if you want to train him up. I genuinely think he's really underrated. Again, though, if you're playing Radiant Dawn, you should probably just give all the stats to Nolan and Jill. But honestly, if you have a few crumbs left over for Leonardo, consider feeding the boy. You might be surprised at how well he can contribute. What isn't a surprise is how damn good Shannon is in this game. His base stats are incredible. Not just his offense, of which he's one of the fastest characters in all of Part 3, he also has bulk that's nearly as impressive as Ike and Gatry. So honestly, his base stats are ridiculously high with very little flaws in them. On top of that, his incredible growth rates from Path of Radiance are still here, meaning he'll also grow into one of your strongest units. He is by far the best candidate for the double bow, and once he has it, he will be absolutely killer in the end game, though he does struggle a little bit to get there. He's really good when you first get him, and he's really good at the end, but around the middle of Part 3, his ability to not attack consistently at one range is a bit of a problem. Crossbows help, but they aren't enough to really say he has a steady enemy phase. But even with that, he's still in the upper echelons of Radiant Dawn units. He is a automatic include in the maps that you have him, if only because a lot of units in Radiant Dawn are absolute garbage. But hey, he's still really, really powerful. I don't know what the fuck this game is thinking with Rolf. In Path of Radiance, I didn't know what they were thinking either, but in Radiant Dawn, he shows up at the same map as Shannon, 10 levels lower and with worse stats. Why would you ever deploy him over Shannon? He just doesn't have anything going for him. If Shannon showed up a little later and Rolf was your only sniper for a bit, alright, sure, that could be an argument, but they show up at the same time. And if you're thinking of an Iron Man context, if Shannon dies, Rolf will just be way too weak because you haven't been using him. It just doesn't make any sense why Rolf is the way that he is. I guess for lore reasons, it would make sense that Rolf is weaker than Shannon, but for lore reasons, why the fuck does Gatry have over 50% in speed? It doesn't make any sense the way Radiant Dawn designed some of the Grail mercenaries. Still, if you decide to ignore Shannon and invest all of your stocks in Rolf, he will grow nicely. It's just, why would you do that when Shannon's right there? And of course, how could I possibly forget the most important archer in all of Radiant Dawn? 313 Archer. For the unaware, 313 Archer was a beloved meme in the community for years, because he is just a generic archer, but he's on one of the most difficult maps in Radiant Dawn, and he holds his own bizarrely well, using a ballista to take out key flying threats, and then jumping down a ledge to solo 3 beasts at once. And this isn't just a funny occasional thing. So many people have memories of him doing this. He's just built different, and I felt wrong about making a video with archers and snipers and not at least tipping my cap to one of the original memes in the community. Good job, 313 Archer. May you inspire generics for decades to come. Remember way long ago when I said that archers and snipers have a problem because their chip damage isn't really required since enemy quality is usually pretty low? Yeah, Shadow Dragon ain't one of those games. Enemies in the higher difficulties of Shadow Dragon are merciless, so a sniper's reliable chip damage is genuinely very useful. It's not a god-awful idea for some maps to reclass someone into a sniper so they can deal safe damage from a distance, especially because snipers have a base C rank in bows, so even if it's a unit that's never fired a bow in their lives, they can still use good bows when they transform into a sniper. So yeah, they're pretty good in this game. However, there are a few problems. Since you can reclass, you can also just reclass into a hunter/horseman, who can do what snipers do but a little better. Though that isn't too bad, it is a knock against snipers that there's a class that kinda does what they want to do better. And of course, we have the quality of archers and snipers that you get. Gordon is a bit better and a bit worse than he was in FE1. On the one hand, his bad stats are now a complete detriment. While promoting the sniper bases made him usable if you wanted to in FE1, in FE11, enemies are way too powerful, and Gordon is gonna fall off a cliff after only the first 3 or so maps. The flip side is he is absolutely vital on those first 3 or so maps on the hardest difficulties. The early game of Shadow Dragon is brutal, so Gordon's chip damage is genuinely necessary to get through the powerful enemies. So yeah, while he falls off a cliff, he is useful during the most difficult parts of the game, which elevates him from complete garbage to kind of garbage. It's not much, but really trying to beat the higher difficulties of FE11 without Gordon is really hard, so he's finally kind of okay. Not really. Like a little under okay. He's something. Norn is a very peculiar unit. She can only be recruited if 2 units die during the prologue, and one of them is the required sacrifice, so you really only need to kill off 1 unit you weren't going to kill off anyway. The problem is your reward is an archer with base stats similar to Gordon, who we've already established has bad base stats, and growths that are just slightly better than Gordon. Because of this, if you train her up, she can be okay, but here's the thing. You can only get her through the prologue, which is something that only happens on normal difficulty. You can't get Norn on higher difficulties, which is where you would want an archer's chip damage. But on the flip side, because she's only playable on normal, enemies are weak enough where her lower stats can be a bit more manageable. The other thing she's facing is the opportunity cost. Everyone in the prologue is more useful than her, except maybe Gordon, who's comparative to her. So then, who would you kill off for her instead? You have to pick either Jagan or one of the 3 Cavaliers, and all of them can do far more than her. So yeah, a weird unit that almost no one has probably gotten organically, and even among people that have gotten her because they're specifically looking for her, she's not exactly going to wow you. Just a strange little unit. George returns in Shadow Dragon and does largely the same thing he's done in every other Arcanea game he's been in. Solid damage, solid stats, is the best archer in the game because he requires no build-up, yada yada yada, you've heard me talk about him before. What makes him unique in Shadow Dragon, though, is how weapon ranks work. In the Arcanea games before, there was the weapon level stat. So as long as you leveled up your archers, they would eventually be able to use better bows. But now, Shadow Dragon has the weapon rank system from all the other games, where the more you use a weapon, the more your rank goes up. This is significant because the Parthia, the A-rank bow, is now largely George's personal weapon, because no other archer can get to A rank in bows as easily as he can. So that is a plus in his favor. But again, there's nothing new to him. The game's changed around him, like I said before, so he's more useful, but as for George himself, he's the same as he ever was. And I'm not going to go into Thomas this time either, there's no real point, he does the same thing he did before. He's usable on the lower difficulties as a George replacement, and on the higher difficulties he's damn near useless. A fate that many Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon characters have. Moving on to New Mystery, it's about the same as Shadow Dragon. Enemies are a lot stronger, so Archer's consistent range chip damage is genuinely very useful. Though again, they are outclassed by Horsemen because Horsemen have better stats and amount, but that doesn't mean an Archer can't contribute really well. Especially early on, where those Wyvern Riders I was talking about in FE3 are still there and are still kicking your ass. The only problem is that New Mystery of the Emblem got rid of dismounting, so archers and snipers really don't have anything over horsemen in this game. People always like to say that the Arcanea remakes were too faithful, but honest to God, they changed too much. But that's a story for another time. I'm not going to go into each archer individually for New Mystery, because I feel like the point has been made. They're solid chip damage, and that's pretty important on the higher difficulties. George is still the best one because he requires no investment, yada yada, I think you get the picture. The only thing I will say is New Mystery added Norn from Shadow Dragon, and she has largely the same problems as before. Good growth rates, poor base stats, use her if you want, and Thomas has come back from the dead! And he's a growth unit that shows up too late to make those growths worthwhile, so he's kind of not good. I know, that's the Cliff Notes version, but I feel like it's not worth diving into them, otherwise I'd just be talking in circles and wasting your time. And trust me, I waste enough of your time already. Moving on to Fire Emblem Awakening, archers have access to 3 classes of skills: Archer, Sniper, and Bow Knight, and all 3 of them offer pretty good skills to use. Archers give a skill that can give 15% hit and avoid on player phase, Snipers get 20 more hit rate and 5 strength when wielding a bow, and Bow Knight can increase the skill of their allies and increase hit and avoid by 50 against bow-wielding enemies. These are all fairly useful skills to have, and archers can be pretty useful if you want to train them up, though their usefulness will vary depending difficulty. lower difficulties really don't have strong enough enemies to warrant using an archer or sniper for chip damage. However, higher difficulties not only have enemies with stats high enough to worry about, but they also have that damn skill counter, which will automatically reflect back any adjacent damage they take unless it kills them, which makes one-range units very risky to attack with, and archers don't give a shit about that. So that is something to keep in mind, though admittedly talking about high-level Lunatic Plus discussion is weird, because if RNG is unkind to you, enemies can just get a combination of skills that make some maps damn near impossible, so it's something to keep in mind, but don't necessarily think of it as gospel. Archers do still struggle in this game, they just have enough tools to be useful if you want to use them. Case in point, the archest of archers, Vurian. He's the only archer in the game for the first generation, and he's okay. His stats are okay. He definitely does suffer from early game archer syndrome, but he has a few things in his favor. Due to the pair-up mechanic, Vurian's mediocre stats, at least early on, can be pretty easily patched up by giving him someone to help his strength and speed. Someone like Vake or Long Q can go a long way in helping him do a bit more damage. Though, of course, that runs into the problem that you'd rather be leveling up Long Q or Vake, but that's neither here nor there. Wyvern Riders on Rickon and Cordelia's join maps are very threatening, and Vurian offers some of your best ways to get rid of them, so he definitely has an early game niche that lasts for a few maps. But his mediocre stats will eventually catch up to him and limit his ability to contribute in the late game. But I think he has enough early game contributions to be considered kind of okay. Nothing amazing, but he's your typical early game archer, if only marginally better than those that came before him. And for the only archer in the second generation, Nor is okay. She does suffer a little bit because her mother is magical oriented, so she's going to get a lot of magic attacks she wishes was physical, but in exchange, Thracia gives her the Dark Mage auras, which can be very useful to have on multiple characters, so Nor manages to get out of a net even with her mother. And on top of that, she can promote right away into whatever class you want, so she can come out the gate immediately and start contributing to your army. She's not the greatest unit, but given how bad archers can be in this series, kind of sort of maybe usable is a step up. So yeah, Nor's got that going for her. While archers aren't terrible in Awakening, Vurian and Nor definitely don't leave good impressions. The class is actually at its best in higher difficulties, and if you want to use a bow unit, you're probably better off reclassing Crom or promoting Gregor into one. They are useful, but they're usually not useful for the ones that are native to it. And if you really want to use bows, you're probably better off teaching Vake how to fire one than anything else. Still though, not the worst showing for the class. Moving on to Fire Emblem Fates, I'm going to be talking about the archers in Birthright and not the outlaws in Nor. I feel as though the outlaw class is very much supposed to be the next step of the thief class, so Niles belongs much more among the likes of Matthew and Rickard than anyone else, in my opinion. As a class, archers are pretty good once again, with skills that focus on giving them huge buffs on player phase, like Quick Draw and Certain Blow. And they have not a Bow Knight promotion, but instead a Kinshi Knight promotion, which gives them flyer utility and some skills when fighting flying enemies, and just a passive health increase to allies that they're near. And a quirk that's not necessarily good or bad about archers in this game have to do with bows, which, after an entire franchise of existing outside of the weapon triangle, now exist within it. They're part of the green group, alongside axes, and have an advantage against lances and shurikens, and a disadvantage against swords and tomes. I personally like bows existing outside of the weapon triangle, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of neat. Like a lot of Fire Emblem Fates gameplay mechanics. It's just neat. All in all, the Archer class should be really good in Birthright. But there's one problem. Their skills are all about player phase combat and flying enemies. Something that Birthright does not give a flying fuck about. There are very few flying enemies you have to fight in the game, so Kinshi Knight's air superiority really doesn't matter that much, and Birthright is a very big enemy phase game, so having a bunch of player phase buffs doesn't help archers. They would be absolutely amazing over in Conquest, which is a much more player phase oriented game, but the archers are stuck in Birthright. They technically are more useful in Revelations, but that requires you to play Revelations, which in some countries is considered a form of torture. And to make matters worse, the first archer you get in Birthright is arguably the worst unit in the game. Setsuna has nothing going for her other than her really good speed, which really isn't that impressive considering most Birthright units are actually pretty fast. And literally, that's all she has going for her. Her stats outside of that, pretty bad. Her personal skill, damn near useless. Her base level, she's level 3 at chapter 8. Setsuna really just has nothing going for her at all. If you want to try and use her, she can probably work just due to the lower difficulty of Birthright, but there are much better options if you want to use a bow unit. Speak of the devil and he shall appear, Takumi is actually very competent. He has very good base stats, very good growth rates, and he has his own personal weapon, which is effectively a silver bow, with a neat little quirk of allowing him to pass through terrain like forests without incurring a movement penalty. It makes him very good from the moment you get him to the end of the game, but he does struggle to find something to do that other units can't, especially when you're in Birthright and you have the ninjas, who can also consistently fight from 2 range, but also can fight from 1 range and have debuffs, which Takumi can't really do unless he becomes one himself. Like I said earlier, Conquest would have loved him. A player phase powerhouse like Takumi would have been great to help some of Conquest's harder maps, but in Birthright, he's still good, he's just not as useful as he could be, which is a shame. I really wish archers were more readily available in Conquest, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Birthright gets the player phase units. I almost completely forgot Kuragi. Kuragi is Takumi's son, and he has a bit of a problem because of that. He's double dipping into skills he would already get naturally, because he has the exact same class as his father. Now, this isn't really that big of a deal. Essentially, it means you can give Kuragi sniper skills, and then have him promoted to Kinshi Knight or vice versa, and that's kinda cool. But it does mean he naturally overlaps with Takumi, and since you probably only have Kuragi if you were training up Takumi, well then you're just gonna be using Takumi. And archers are not a class that's important enough that you'd want to field 2 of them. Hell, you really don't even need to field 1 of them, so Kuragi struggles to really find a reason to exist. He's not awful, he can still contribute if you want to, it's just the nature of his existence kind of works against itself. Moving on to Echoes, and this is where archers are really good. They have all the benefits they had in Gaiden of massive bow range and an eventual mount when they promote, but they get even more with the addition of combat skills. Hunter Volley is a very powerful skill and can let you attack twice in a row without getting counterattacked for relatively low cost, and it requires the killer bow, which isn't that hard to get on either route, though it is noticeably easier to get on Celica's route. Also, aiming with an iron bow helps their early game accuracy problems. In general, archers are fantastic in this game, and are definitely something worth considering for every villager. Though, admittedly, you still want some mercs, but honestly, making Tobin and Atlas into archers? A pretty solid idea if you ask me. Definitely really good. And the DLC also added an overclass to it. Like with every overclass, it's wildly unnecessary, but looks really cool, so you need to go give Nintendo your money to buy it. But you can't do that anymore, so I guess just pirate it and then mail them $5. Going over Python and Leon again is a little unnecessary in my opinion, as they both do the exact same thing they did back in Gaiden, but now do it even better with the buffs the class has gotten from the combat arts. In fact, they're so much stronger now that some people consider Leon to be the best unit in Celica's entire campaign, and honestly, I can kind of agree with it, though I think Saber makes a good argument. Still though, really solid showing for bow lovers and Echoes. Genuinely some of the strongest the class has ever been. While not quite as dominant as they are in Gaiden, Archers have another really solid showing in Fire Emblem Three Houses, with a lot of things going in their favor. Bow skills are still here, and offer some powerful attacks like Curve Shot and the return of the beloved Hunter Volley. And if you train in bows, you'll quickly get the ability Close Counter, which allows them to have an enemy phase presence by counterattacking at close range, eliminating their main weakness. They also get increasing bow range as they promote. Not as absurd as 5 range like in Echoes, but +1 as Archer and Sniper, and +2 as a Bow Knight, ending up with 4 bow range on regular bows, which is still very impressive. And not to mention how certain combat arts will increase the bow range even further than that, leading to some pretty nutty distances you can attack from. The main weakness of the class, quote-unquote, is that Bow Knight has pretty bad growth rates, but by the time you reach Bow Knight, you're usually pretty fine, and really, Bow Knight's growth rates aren't that terrible. And if you have a problem with it, you could easily just go back to Sniper with how the class system works in Three Houses. And Snipers also get exclusive access to Hunter's Volley, so Snipers actually have some diversity in what they want to do. If you need the movement range, go Bow Knight. If you need more damage, go Sniper. It's actually a very flexible class line that's very worth considering for quite a few units, even the ones that aren't technically the designated archers of their houses. Speaking of, every house has one designated archer unit, and then the faculty has one as well. So let's get into it. Starting off with the Black Eagle's bow user, Bernadetta is absolutely cracked. Not necessarily because of her stats, though they're fine. Her crest is also pretty good, occasionally allowing her to make an extra attack. No. The thing that makes Bernadetta fucking stupid is her personal skill, Persecution Complex. Bernadetta weaponizes her panic attacks and deals 5 more damage per attack when she's at a certain HP threshold. Now, for those of you that either haven't played Black Eagles or haven't played Three Houses, I want you to guess. What do you think the HP threshold is that Bernadetta needs to reach to deal 5 more damage? If your answer was 99% or below, you are correct. Bernadetta just needs to have any damage taken to get this incredible buff. And that includes the HP she would technically quote-unquote lose just by leveling up HP. It is insanely easy to keep this thing going on her, and since she's an archer, you can then easily leave her out of range of enemies and have her do a fuckzillion damage. Bernadetta is one of the best units in the game and is very strong. Even if you're not playing Black Eagles, it might be worth it to just grab her away from them if you're playing Blue Lions or Golden Deer, because she's just that good. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, my boy Ash from the Blue Lions is one of the worst units in the game, if not the absolute worst. The main problem is Ash has absolutely nothing that stands out. He doesn't have a crest, and his personal skill is Lock Touch, the ability to open doors and chests without a key. Now, that is an absolute flavor win for Ash's backstory, but it doesn't actually help him fight anything, and door and chest keys are an easy supply, And the Thief class line is actually something worth going down for Assassin, so you really do not need to dedicate someone's skill, especially their personal skill, to Lock Touch. So all Ash has going for him are his stats and growth rates, which aren't abysmal, but they're not enough to make him stand out at all. If you're playing Blue Lions and you want an archer, it is much more appealing to go steal Ignatz or Bernadetta because they actually have personal skills that make them worth using. I love Ash, he's my boy, but he is just damn near useless. I almost feel like the DLC Anna was specifically created so that Ash wouldn't be the worst unit in the game anymore. And rounding out our trio of student archers, Ignatz is honestly my favorite in the way that he's designed. Being in the same house as Claude, Ignatz was never going to match his raw killing power as a bow unit, so instead, he's designed to be a support archer. His personal skill is hit plus 20, which is really funny if you think about it. My personal skill is the side effect of my horrible social anxiety, a result of my father's horrible and abusive parenting. My personal skill is the result of my years as an orphan, forced to steal from other people just to survive on the brutal city streets. My personal skill is that I wear glasses. But humor aside, what it does is give him incredible accuracy, and it also stacks with the other skill hit 20, allowing him to get plus 40 hit. With this, he can land his attacks and give them seal strength, which is a personal skill he learns after some tutoring with his hidden talent, which will lower an enemy's attack by 6. He also gets the combat break shot, which lowers their defense by 5. With these two combined, and bow range, he can cripple powerful enemies from a very safe distance. And if the enemies aren't what needs buffing, he has very easy access to rally speed, one of the most, if not the most, important rally skills. With this, Ignatz is very useful on every map. Even if he's not going to be a killing machine like Bernadetta, he's still going to be very useful. I really like how they didn't try to make him a broken damage unit because they knew he wouldn't stack up to Claude. They just let him do his own thing, which really makes him both fun and useful, one of the better units in the Golden Deer. And representing the faculty, Shamir is also incredible, having fantastic base stats, early recruitment all things considered, and good growth rates. Shamir might not be flashy in what she does, but she is just a model of consistency, able to do great damage at every point in the game. And her personal skill, while it can be a little awkward to use, is really good if you can get it going. Shamir is just an easy auto-include on any route. Good bases, good growths, you don't really need that much more to get the job done. And bringing us home is Fire Emblem Engage. After how powerful archers have been in Echoes and Three Houses, Engage brings them back down to earth, as they can continue to deal okay chip damage, but they aren't quite as incredible as they were before. No more ridiculous bowfare or anything, they're just attacking from 2 range away, doing chip damage, and that's all. It is worth noting that archers and snipers cannot interact with the break mechanic, as they cannot have any weapon triangle advantage to break enemies. However, the break mechanic can interact with them, as bows are weak to martial arts and can get broken if hit by them. Though that's honestly more so something the player does than the enemy does, because if you're letting your archer get attacked by a melee attack, you're already doing something wrong, and if you left them in front of the one thing that can break them, that's your own goddamn fault. This actually isn't that big of a problem, as it's nice to have something that's always neutral, especially when bosses have multiple health bars, enemies can be pretty tough, so the chip damage an archer provides is not useless. And the Bow Knight promotion is actually kind of neat in this game, as if an archer has any kind of melee weapon proficiency, they'll just get whatever that weapon is. You're not forced into either swords or lances or whatever like in some previous games. All in all, the class isn't exactly amazing, but in concept, it is not that bad. Unfortunately, Fire Emblem Engage is a love letter to the series, and that means it's bringing back the shitty early game archer in all of her glory. Etty is really, really strong. That's it. Just strong. Other than strength, all of her stats are abysmal. In particular, her speed and constitution, meaning this woman will not double anything to save her life. She's useful in the first 2 or so maps that she's in, because you have to deploy her, and there are some flyers that are specifically designed for her to take out, but beyond that, she has little to no staying potential. She's one of the worst units in the game. If you really wanted to make Etty work, you either need to reclass her, which not what this video is about, or give her Lyn and never have her let go. Lyn's sweet, juicy speed skills are the only thing that will allow Etty to double enemies and do any real damage. But Lyn is in high demand because of exactly that on units that are better than Etty. So yeah, she can work just because Engage is a sandbox with a lot of strategies, but it is not worth it whatsoever.
What is my purpose?
You get replaced by Alchrist.
Oh my god.
Speaking of, moving on to Alchrist. Now I know he's not technically an archer, but I'm still gonna cover him here. Horsemen, ballisticians, merchants, they all feel like they're diverse enough from archers to warrant talking about in a separate video. Alchrist is literally just an archer sniper. His class name is different, but that's what he is, so I'm going to be going over him. I'll also be going over Diamant on a Mercenary Hero video, Celine on a Mage Sage video. They're very clearly meant to be slightly special versions of classes that already exist, and I don't feel like they warrant their own video. Anyways, with that disclaimer out of the way, Alchrist is decent. He comes in with much better stats than Etty, outside of her strength, but actually, to Etty's credit, few units have her strength. And Alchrist will do a good job, until he is inevitably replaced by Fogado. If you want to keep using Alchrist, his strength and damage do fall off a bit as the game goes on. But he does have one secret trick up his sleeve, Luna. In this game, it is the personal skill of his promoted sniper class. So, while Alchrist might not have the greatest strength, he will be able to ignore defense and do a lot of damage. It functions with dexterity as a percentage for activation, and Alchrist's dexterity is really, really good, so he procs it fairly consistently. Now, is this a good strategy? No, you're going to want to use someone who's safer like the aforementioned Fogado, but it is a fun strategy. Alchrist is the first archer I've felt since Jomke that's just fun to use even if they're not good. Watching Luna and watching it crit is a very fun feeling. So even if it's not a consistent strategy, it's still one worth trying at least once when you play through Engage. Doing this video has made me realize how much archers have never really been a bad class as much as Fire Emblem has just given you bad archers to use. There are plenty of standout units in the series' history that really makes it sad that archers have a bad rep. Are they ever the best class in the game? No, but they've almost always had a member who is usable in some way, and when they're usable, they genuinely make useful contributions. I really wonder what the next game in the series is going to have for them. Are they going to go back to the incredible bow range of things like Gaiden or Three Houses, or are they going to return to themselves and be more so two-range units? Whatever comes for the class, I really hope that they decide to make the archers actually usable. Give them stats that make sense. Maybe give them an EXP boost so they can get to sniper faster. Just stop making archers suck ass so we can actually have good ones to train up from the start. Or, you know, just keep making good snipers. I guess I can take at least one member of the class being good. As long as there are more Georges in the world, I think everything's gonna be okay. thank you very much for making it to the end of the video. These videos are very long, but it's very fun to look back throughout the series' entire history. I don't know what class I'm going to cover next. If you have an idea, please leave it in the comments below. Before the video ends, I would like to thank my patrons, whose constant support over the 5 years on this channel has made it possible for me to keep doing this and keep doing what I love. Well, okay, I'm kind of overselling it. They don't make this channel possible, but they do give me money, which means they're more important than making it possible. They're making it profitable. My patrons include the likes of Adebayo Thompson, Alex Arliga, Amuse not beating the Tails allegations, Andrew Crockett, Bean Juice, Benz Again, Dr. McBackstab, Hell on Heelys, Jae Hyun, Despacito 2, Larmachi, Ly-7ing Bolt, Morga Lorcan, Played Arrow, Played is pronounced like the pattern, Ranger Man Sam, Shen Lu, Viri the Artist, Ya Girl Owen, Brentendo 11, Drew Hack, Fire Emblem Lord, Ginger, Goo Gaga, Cornelia Milkers 92, Inverse, Lev Maverick, Maple Knight, and Upscale Furry Trash. Thank you all for your continued support, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.